Good afternoon.
Good morning, good afternoon. We're raising levels. Get us the music, get us in the mood. Good morning, Jean-Luc. Introductions, how you doing?
Well, you kind of did half of that job already. Hi, my name is Jean-Luc, also known as Lucky by some of my peers. I am my father's son and currently a student at the University of Aruba and had a passion of tech my whole life.
And to retort, I am my son's father. Yeah, my name is Bruce Harms, content creator, multimedia engineer, digital marketing consultant, and also a passion for technology and how it impacts our lives. So welcome everybody, and if you're going to watch this show later on, we've got something interesting I want to talk about today, and we'll be partitioning the show in one part for me and then one part for you. Yeah, let me just pull up some information here. I want to talk about the Event Horizon Telescope project. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of that?
I have. It was a few years ago, if I remember correctly. COVID's been a roughly 2-year blur of time for me.
Okay.
And but I do remember hearing about the fact that a lot of people were trying to take a picture of a black hole.
Right. And you know, what I want to talk about with the audience is that, you know, this was an amazing convergence of technology, mm-hmm. right? So did you know that they combined all the telescopes in the world to make this happen?
I remember hearing about that, but didn't know to what extent it was.
Well, a great way to find out about this project, and this is also going to become a Netflix recommendation, mm-hmm. please go check out Black Holes, The Edge of All We Know. Mm-hmm. Amazing documentary. You know, I have a passion for astrophotography and astronomy. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I used to own something called a reflector, right? It's a reflector telescope, which has a parabolic mirror on the bottom. And then, you know, light comes in, comes mm-hmm. to a little mirror on the side, and then boom, through an eyepiece. And it's a lot like photography, you know, you work with glass and then you can magnify. And mm-hmm. I used to track something called the Messier catalog, which catalogs the sky. And then I look for certain objects, like, for example, in the Orion constellation, right at the belt, mm-hmm. there's like 3 stars. Yeah. And in the middle, there's the Orion Nebula that is visible to the naked eye. But do you know anything about astrophotography?
About astrophotography, not specifically.
Yeah.
Though I've always had a interest in just astronomy and astrophysics in general. Yeah,
so I also have another book, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. Mm-hmm, great mm-hmm. book. It's also it's from Tyson LaGrasse. Forgot his full name. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, great book to give you sort of a quick cheat list of concepts of quantum physics. But what I love about it, there's a historical context. So let's go back to black holes, the edge of all we know. Mm-hmm. So what is a black hole? Right?
From what I understand, a black hole is basically a extremely dense and super volatile object, yeah, with that gravity is so strong that it basically starts messing with the fabric of time and space. Light can't escape it. And the reason why it's called a black hole is because technically we can't see it, and information goes in, and most of it doesn't come out.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, let me let's make sure that our listeners can go and find out. I highly recommend going to check out this documentary, but we're going to spoil it a little bit because we need to talk about certain aspects of this documentary. And so, spoiler alert right now. If you don't want to know, don't continue listening. But we want to talk about as progress of humanity and why it was important for us to learn about these black holes. So you're right. What I've understood, it's a massive vortex of gravitational force, and it's been Stephen Hawking's 40-year life's work, like in his end of his life, because we lost him, I think, in 2018, 2019. Wasn't so long ago.
2018.
Yeah, we lost him. And did you know he was working on a paper that was released, and the paper is called "The Black Hole Entropy and Soft Hair."
Soft hair.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. Where it was done by 4 people and a collaboration: Sasha Hako, Stephen Hawking, Malcolm Perry, and Andrew Strominger, where they tried to figure out the informational paradox of a black hole. The paradox is that laws of physics have rules. There's laws, and it's a very strange thing that you're right. Things go into a black hole. So let's imagine a banjo goes in, right? But a black hole is not forever. It's like a sun. It powers and then it powers down. It kind of ends its cycle, and then when it's gone, there's nothing left. There's only static. And they start approaching a black hole like information, which I thought was super interesting. So they were looking at that paradox. So how can the information go in, cosmic information, and nothing is left but static?
Yeah, because a key aspect of the world, usually set in thermodynamics, is that information cannot be created nor destroyed.
Exactly.
So it makes sense that where does the information go, because it can't be destroyed?
And it seems that they discovered something. They discovered that in the event horizon, right, there is information because it's radiating stuff, and they've coined it soft hair. And conceptually, when something passes through, like water, let's say it's like in the old cartoons, when the roadrunner runs through the wall, and then there's like this silhouette left.
Yeah.
And that's how you have to see it. So when things go through it, they leave a ripple.
Oh.
And in that ripple, they can, find out what went in and what went out. And they try to create an equation that is the most complicated equation that they ever created. And that's the story that is told in the documentary. And what's very interesting, there's a very young girl. So I'm also a big believer in women empowerment. Go check it out. It's very interesting to see all these scientists work on that aspect. But then let's talk about the Event Horizon Telescope program, which was really amazing. So
tell me.
Yeah, so what they did was they combined all these enormously powerful telescopes all over the world to work together to take one image. And that image was an attempt to take a picture of the black hole. And it's amazing how so many cultural communities came together to realize this. And in this story, they took that picture. And it is the first ever, let's call it peer-reviewed, right? Because here's a problem. If you and me take a picture of something, right? So if I take a picture of Jean-Luc, I saw Jean-Luc, and I can confirm it. Oh yeah, that's Jean-Luc, because we can comparison. But if you're taking a picture of something that is, about 65 billion light years away, you don't know what it looks like. So they had to go through this process of how do we make sure this is a real picture or not just blurred data. And that's I can't explain it. I don't have the mastery of science like that. But it was pretty amazing. And what's also amazing to realize is that we're living in a period we have all this computing power, right?
Huge amounts
of power, and that's why it became also more feasible, where all these data sets were then created, and they had to ship each other the hard disks.
What?
Yeah, so all over the world together, they took this one picture. The right environment settings had to be there, and I don't know exactly how that happened, but go check out the documentary. But they were shipping each other disk towers, like paralleled disks, and then it took them a month to process them.
A month,
yeah.
Using the latest technology.
It took them a month. So
Wow.
it was all about magnification, really, and then confirming the data sets. So 200 scientists from Japan to Hawaii to the States to Latin America, worked together on this and came together in 2017. So pretty amazing stuff. So I'm going to ask our producer, hey, Jeff, for our viewers, can we pull up the picture? Oh,
All right.
awesome. Yeah, let me confirm that.
So for the audio only listeners to the show,
Great, yeah.
it looks like just a very blurry picture of a cat's eye, I would say.
Well,
Orange,
what's interesting about this
yellowish.
picture, yeah, I'm looking at it right now, I'm confirming it. What's amazing is that there is it's spherical, right? So it's
It is
spherical.
spherical, yeah.
It's of course it's not a perfect circle, and what they've kind of confirmed is that there's something happening around it, right?
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
the whole point about the event horizon. You can't see what's in the center, but what you can see is what's happening around it. And I think it's actually something very amazing that most people. Look, Stephen was right about a lot of things, and he was these people. Excuse me, the scientists that worked on it, and I think we're gonna talk about a little bit about the event horizon. So I have another picture that I want to ask the producer to put up, what the event horizon is. And I think it's about detecting things they can't see. Like we're used to, oh, there's the moon, I can see it, right? And then now we have to look for stuff that has to have an effect
Yeah.
with its surroundings,
So
right?
instead of looking for it's looking for its effect on the environment.
Yes, that's how they find planets, right? So they trace the sun, and then they see if the sun dims a bit, and then
Yeah.
they can see an orbit, right? So it's all very logical, but then we have these amazing instruments to confirm these things. So the event horizon, I think Jeff pulled it up, right? So one second. And that's the great thing about the show. We can just take our time. There's no pressure, no commercial.
Which one?
You see the Earth and the fabric that it folds. So it's the event horizon picture.
The grid.
Yeah,
That's
so
like a grid.
just to continue explaining it, a simple example is that space and time you can't see, but you can see what gravity can do to it,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
that's that concept of event horizon, and that's why they called it the Event Horizon Telescope Project. And everybody can check it out at, let me see, just Google Event Horizon Telescope, and you can find it, and it's super interesting. And yeah.
So what some speculation says about how you would be able to tell if a black hole is there is that if it's not black, it's actually like warped, right?
Well, it's void of information.
It's void of information, but
yeah.
you can see it bend space and time, right?
Yeah.
And an idea is that once light goes into one direction, it's not going to go into the black hole immediately, right? It would circle. And so if you look directly into a black hole, at certain spots, you should be able to see what's behind you by looking at it.
Something along those lines. Yeah. You have the thing in three dimensions
Three
when you
dimensions,
look at
yes.
the two-dimensional image. And Jeff just showed the audience the picture of what they say as, effects on space and time. But we're finally at a point where we're figuring out a little bit more about the universe. And what I think is interesting, it's technology coming together. And I wanted to stipulate something else. It's also, if you go back 80 years, 100 years, we had tool sets like bent glass and bent mirrors, and mathematicians really, and trying to confirm it. And now we're at a space where, together with massive computing power and imaging and how they can track subparticles, what we're doing is simulating stuff before. So before they went to take this picture, and what does a black hole do in the center of the universe, and all the, what's its function really? How does it balance out the universe? And it's because of simulations, because the scientists in the past had to, confirm it through mathematics,
yeah.
but now they see the mathematics visually impacting other things. So there's a new subsets of results coming, and I think that's super cool. That again, our advancement in processing data gives us more insight on, and we can go deeper into the universe, and we're learning a lot more. And it's also becoming even a bit scary, in my opinion, because black matter and the universe is expanding. Black holes are not forever. Suns are not forever.
Mhm,
But I
mhm.
do think it's going to help us out.
And I think the biggest implication of the picture is merely the confirmation of its existence.
Yes, absolutely. It's if you're interested in this stuff, I'm going to give a shout out to Uncle Lampa, right? He's also a big fan of astronomy and astrophotography. Yeah, it's very interesting, and we need to explore this more and talk about these things more. We're so focused on politics and war.
Yeah.
I would love to. It should become a little bit more mainstream. I even wasn't aware of how really that picture was taken. I thought too simply of it. I thought, oh yeah, they just pointed it from some space telescope and took a picture. But it was a little bit more complicated than that. So yeah, thank you guys for listening. That's my part, and we're doing well on time. That's a good 15 minutes.
Oh, nice.
But again, go check out on Netflix, Black Holes, The Edge of All We Know. And we're going to move forward with something that Jean-Luc wanted to talk about.
Before we get into that, I play this game. I've told you about this before.
Oh, you mean when you're pilot in space?
Yeah. yes.
It looks immersive.
Oh, it is extremely immersive. Yes. It is a game for those who clearly don't know. It's called Elite Dangerous.
Elite Dangerous.
Yes.
Let me pull it up.
And simply put, it is a space flight simulator.
Right.
Where you have your spaceship, and you're allowed to go fly in pseudo-Newtonian physics environment.
Pseudo-Newtonian physics,
Yes,
right? So so what you're saying, it's trying to be a real simulation.
It's trying to be an accurate depiction of how it would be to fly a spaceship in space.
So does that mean that you have to deal with radiation and solar flares and subparticles and all that?
No.
Gravitational pulls?
Yes,
Okay.
gravitational pulls, drag, the weight of the ship, the placements of your engines changes how it is, the shape of your ship changes it.
Let's dive a bit deeper. Let's go geeky on it. Okay, so what's your drive? What kind of drive are you using?
So there are different modes of travel in the game, right?
Okay.
Because the biggest hurdle about space when it comes to travel is the fact that it's so huge, so massive. Right? Huge. Yeah.
Okay. Of course.
Massive. It's very difficult to fully grasp how much space there is out there.
Right.
Just of course, there's like things in there, but for the most part, pretty much empty, right? Of course, there's information, there's radiation, there's like particles that are popping.
But don't you have a problem also with time? Because it is so big that you have it's a hard time calibrating reality, right? So if you see a point of interest, so how does the game solve, massive amount of distance that cause fluctuation in how you experience time? So how does that work?
So to their solution to faster than light travel,
right,
is using a Alcubierre drive.
Right. And that's fictional?
The Alcubierre drive is the first faster than light engine that was created fictionally, but with like an equation. It has many issues, but the idea is that instead of you moving, the engine or the ship would move space around you.
Right.
So then
folding space.
Yeah, so it's folding space.
Absolutely.
It pulls space towards you in the front and pushes space away from you, behind you, and then you would move forward without needing to deal with the going faster than light issues and then time stuff.
In great old science fiction, because I am a science fiction fan, that is how they solve that issue, where move without moving. And great folding space was invented, or not invented really, but proposed as a concept of international logistics through Frank Herbert's Dune that's coming out soon.
Oh.
And Frank Herbert's Dune's world, universe, that's how it's done. The guild, Spacing Guild, fold space and what they do is fold it in a way that they can foresee collisions and avoid them, right? So I think, but doesn't that cause, or don't you need huge amounts of energy to do that, or they solve that?
So basically, the designers of the game basically said that is the magic that allows the game to happen, right?
Right.
So within the lore, within the story of the game, they basically found the engine. Humanity never made it, and they figured out how to make it work, right? And what it is fueled by is hydrogen.
Of course, that's
hydrogen, the most
elemental,
abundant material on the in the universe.
The building block of the universe.
Number one.
The number one atom, right? It's a lot of people don't know this, but if you learn a little bit about astrophysics and the elemental chart, that has a history. So right after the Big Bang, the first micro, mini, little tiny millisecond, that was the first atom that was born, and that first gas was the first phase of the universe. And very interesting, by the way. So I'm looking at your game, EliteDangerous.com. So let's give a recommendation out to the gaming community. Want to check something out?
Available on Steam. They just released a DLC called Odyssey, where you can now traverse on planets with a light atmosphere and actually walk around. Because for the most part of the current development of the game, you are not able to leave your seat of your ship.
I'm seeing it. It looks really cool. Look, great graphics.
The graphics are absolutely beautiful.
Let's go check out the rating for a second so we can communicate that. So Elite Dangerous on IGN is giving us right now, 1 second, it's got a 7.4, not bad. So you can see it's in development, but you're a big fan, right?
I am.
Were you playing another game because my son had this enormous simulation package with
a HOTAS is what it's called.
Explain.
Basically, it is I don't know what the abbreviation stands for, but it is a flight and throttle stick system.
Right.
So I have a little stick like you've seen in
Top Gun.
In Top Gun, or in just if you peer into the cockpit of an airplane, you can maybe see a throttle. And I
think it's called a flight stick.
Flight stick throttle. I'm trying to visualize.
We're gonna get some feedback on this one. I know some pilots friend of mine. They're gonna say, "Oh my God, guys!"
No. I am not experienced in the terminology of these devices.
Right.
But I also have some flight pedals.
Yeah.
And
you have the throttle and everything. Yeah.
And I use those to be able to maneuver in my ship, right?
Right.
And the most beautiful aspect of Elite Dangerous is that while it is simply put a spaceflight simulator, it has a 2-scale galaxy, Milky Way galaxy, to go and explore. That for the most part it is randomly generated, but the creators keep track of interesting astronomical discoveries that are found, or key astronomical discoveries, and place those in the game as accurately as it could be.
Right. Interesting.
So, for example, I could go in the game visit Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse, yes.
The giant red star.
The supermassive giant red star.
I say Betelgeuse just to make sure that people understand it's not spelled like Beetlejuice. You can see that. You can see that star a lot in the Caribbean. It's very... It's the reddest star in the sky. Yeah, super cool. You can take pictures with it of any camera, and in my experience, zooming in doesn't really help you much. You need a really powerful telescope. But yeah, that's one of the biggest objects in the sky.
And so one of the most interesting and very gorgeous experiences was to visit a black hole in the game.
Right. Let's go. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. And
was it were you in danger or?
So an excuse in the game that they give is that the ships are huge, right?
Right.
Massive.
They
dwarf houses.
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 I thought you were going to tell me cruise ships or something.
Well, some of the, like, you have different ships. Some are bigger, some are smaller, and some of them dwarf cruise ships as well.
Right.
And so they have an AI on the ship that
Helps them navigate.
Helps them navigate.
Of course, sort of like a drone.
Yeah. It also makes sure that you don't have to constantly navigate each little engine so that you don't drift constantly. It helps you pilot. And what it does is it gives hard borders to certain stellar bodies that you can't go any closer, right?
Wow.
And so basically...
Sounds something applicable.
Yes. It sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
There is a hard border to a black hole, so I can't go into Event Horizon and explode and die in the ship. No.
Absolutely.
But I can get like extremely close, right?
Right. And you have instruments that can see things, obviously. So if are you in an exploratory ship? Are you a warship?
Any ship, I can customize it. It can be explorer ship, but for the most part, I'm in an explorer ship. Yeah.
Right.
They jump farther away and have better. They're more efficient with energy and everything.
Is there a community? Could I join the game and it's an open world and
yes.
Can we engage?
It is it's an MMO, massive multiplayer online. And there is a thriving community of players in the game. They go from PvP, which is player versus player, where they try to make the best battleship that they can and test each other's flight skills,
right,
and aiming skills in the ship within certain areas. There are explorer communities where they just go out and try to explore as much of the galaxy as possible. Not even 1% of the galaxy has been explored yet. Even with
generated
of the content that's available.
And it's across the board, or does every single person engage the same environment, or is it random?
They can.
Okay.
It is. You can join different servers, right? But then in the game, everybody's not in the same instance, right? So not everybody's in the same server at the same time. There's different layers.
That would be hard.
Yeah, but it solves a lot of like computing power issues, and it's surprisingly very efficient. Even in very low power computers can run Elite Dangerous. Not on the best graphics, so you don't get to enjoy the beauty of the game, but it can still run. It's surprisingly efficient.
we should bring this game over on the next show. I think it's super cool, super interesting. It might even be educational, is what you're saying?
Yeah, in terms of visiting solar bodies and then showing the beauty of it. You can visit nebulas. You can even visit Sagittarius A, which is the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy.
This is the right jam for that. I want to fly with you now. I want to go check it out, you know?
And so the best experience I've ever had in that...
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. Is in VR.
I knew you were building up to something. Good for you. So let's go to augmented reality.
Augmented and virtual reality, yes.
Right. Let's talk about that. So
I have been blessed to have access to a virtual reality system.
What was it called?
The HTC Vive.
The HTC?
HTC Vive, yeah.
Vive?
Vive, yeah.
Vive, V-I-V-E.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a first generation one. They managed to release a Pro and a second generation, if I'm correct.
I've got it here.
And I basically have a headset and has a bunch of sensors. There are two cameras, so to speak, that look down into my room, and using infrared, it keeps track of the positioning of my camera and two controllers. And that way they basically make a little box. And if I move in reality there, they superposition it in game, and then I can move around in game. And the beauty of it is, all of a sudden when I put the headset on, instead of looking at a screen sitting in a spaceship, I'm sitting in a spaceship. My chair is the spaceship chair. And I can look around, look at the windows, see the star passing by, see another ship explode in the distance by just looking around. fully immersive, and the sound design of that game.
Okay,
oh,
let's talk about the dangerous.
It could be. The biggest danger is you not being able to see what's around you in real life. So if you get too immersed, you might fall out of your chair.
Okay,
Or
exactly.
or if you're walking around, you might hit into a wall.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've had occasions where I gave a friend the setup, and they played another virtual reality game called Super Hot.
I know Super Hot, yeah.
Super Hot. And for those who don't know, it is a first-person shooter game.
Right.
Where the goal is to survive and kill other people who are trying to kill you, AIs. And the goal is to feel like Keanu Reeves.
Yeah. It's all about slow motion.
Slow motion,
It's fast-paced, and then once the danger comes in, you have to make a little move, and
Time only moves when you move.
right.
So it gives you time, but if you move...
And you play this with the virtual...
in virtual reality, yeah.
Oh.
So I myself had to like dodge and duck and bullets and slash at somebody. But what happened was my friend who was playing it, in the game there was a wall. And so I wasn't really paying attention to the screen, right? Because the screen can show, of course, what he's watching, right? And all of a sudden he fell. And he told me that he tried to lean against the wall in the game.
I knew he was going to do that. You said wall, and I thought he's going to probably lean on it. He's going to try and touch it.
Yeah, he tried to lean. And then he... In reality, there's no wall. And he just fell. And
so funny.
And that's how immersive it can be, right?
Oh, no. You got it brand new. And I thought it was amazing. I got to play Star Wars.
Yes, I got you
so
the Star Wars
just
one.
For the listeners, very interestingly, I had a lightsaber. And it does work because when you pivot your hand, it feels like holding a bat, right? So it's very light. And it was very interesting. I was feeling the movie. I'm ducking down, and I'm actually using my eyes for the laser when it comes in. I have to use my eyes, and then I try to gauge. It comes in, and I block it with the saber. So that's how my technique of block. It's not like swinging for a ball. So you got to protect your body. So once it comes to your body, you actually have to try and meet it with your eyes, and then block it with the lightsaber. And it was really cool. And I can only imagine if you're like a super fan of Star Wars, which a lot of people are.
Yeah.
I found out that I'm not a super fan, but if I was, I would be going for that, to experience Star Wars and entering the world with most of my senses except for smell.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's audiovisual. It's cool. But let's talk about. Do you think it has educational application?
Definitely. So the best part about virtual reality is the fact that you can go basically anywhere.
Right.
The limit is only the environment that the virtual reality is in. And which means that you can create an environment to be able to teach people of what it would be like to be, for example, in the underground mines, where instead of it being a hazard for you to go there, you...
Well, let's take it a step further.
Tell me.
Volcano.
Or volcano, yeah.
Go walk in it.
You can go walk next to magma or lava. I don't know the difference.
And what we could do through simulations is like use its property management, I guess. So the Newtonian laws, for example. So what would happen with a block of wood? What would happen with a block of iron? What would happen with a block of aluminum? So you could kind of simulate and run tests.
Yeah.
Right. So I think from a scientific application with the right engine, you could mitigate future dangers by trying it out first. And that's exactly what they did with the study of the black holes.
They simulated.
They try to simulate what the black hole does with its environment. And they confirmed it later on. So there was a lab that had a pool of water, and they film it. Right, so they film it, and then they track what's going on with the water, with massive amounts of data with particles,
Mm-hmm.
and they start messing with it, see what it does, what the ripple does, so you can learn about the universe. And they even then confirmed that they found 3 stars that collapsed into each other, and that was the confirmation of a massive black hole. And those stars were enormous.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. So, but with the help of simulations, they could predict it much more accurately. So I think augmented reality, what's going to be interesting is that if they can apply those kind of simulations together with, somebody that's in there without any danger and can start doing experiments in a more layered level, I guess. So I imagine putting properties of materials and make it interact with very dangerous things like lava, for example, or hurricanes even.
Another very interesting thing about virtual reality is its application to be able to connect people.
And this is where we're going to have a lot of contradictory concepts, because in this new world, one of our big issues is social impact and what computing and gaming does to the fabric of the community. And this is where we have to find a balance, I think. So I actually think as time goes by, as the world progresses and moves forward with combating the climate crisis, it might even be something where communities that cannot really create the financial backing to visit the world, something that we were privileged to have, people like you and me, had the privilege to be able to go lots of places in the world. South America, you've been to Japan, I lived in Europe for a while. So for us, as a Rubens, really, we sort of have access to lots of travel, but I'm sure that's not the case all over the world. But maybe, just maybe, as technology becomes more accessible, we can give more people rich experiences and rich education. And let's be honest, everybody's allowed to have a little bit of entertainment, right? That's we consume so much time gaming and Netflix and entertaining. So everybody should have that access to have a more rich life, because we have to experience life. And I think augmented reality, if we approach it that way, it can actually help people learn more about everything.
Yeah, but augmented reality is different from virtual reality.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
I'll give you an example of what I have done with augmented reality. We created an app once with Aruba.com where you use your camera, and then it's also augmented reality. It puts extra information and layered over what you're looking at. So, for example, you're walking through Oranienstad, and then boom, the restaurant is registered in the app, and it gives extra information, its website and whatnot. So those are more simple applications for travel. But augmented reality has many ways.
Yes.
But usually it involves a computer,
of course,
and some kind of data that comes in, and in this case it's GPS and the camera imagery. But give me another version of augmented reality besides virtual, because that's a virtual reality you're talking about.
What I'm talking about is virtual reality. Yes,
right, so let's talk about augmented reality now.
So I think a prime example would have been Google Lens.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Elaborate.
So
I'm not really familiar with what that was. You mean the Google Glass, like the
Google Glass? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was the
the very strange thick glass thing that people would wear, and for like only half a year it was a trend, but then everybody realized the ridiculousness of it, and just.
Was it ridiculous in your opinion?
The idea and the design behind it was thought out, but it was very limited in what it wanted to do, right?
Right, yeah.
Since with virtual reality and with the VR systems, HTC Vive, for example, Oculus Rift, more famous one, Steam also created their own system, if I remember correctly, don't know the name. You have controllers,
right.
And in a virtual environment, you can very accurately interact with the virtual
world.
Reality,
exactly.
World.
You're in an engine, so it's very efficient.
There, yes.
Right.
And so the problem with the Google glasses, the Google lenses was
gotta process two things.
Yeah, you have to process what's going on in reality and how that would interact with what you are seeing in the augmented one.
Yeah.
So that's why it's virtual data that augments reality. And the problem was it was pretty much, if I remember correctly, very clunky to use.
Right.
And the entire goal is for it to be
Reactive. Highly reactive.
Seamless.
Yeah, well, seamless is one thing. This is how you experience it, right? But I'm sure if you think about it, there's a great episode on the Netflix series Black Mirror about that, where someone lives in an apartment and he's installed one of those glasses on his eye. So it's probably just a layer, and then his apartment is white. Everything is white. Because they're all canvases for his augmented reality. Everything is done. Cooking is done with a game, right? So he cooks and he gathers points.
Wow.
Yeah. So that if you would take it the next step, gamifying your life into points and scores and stars and reviews, right? Imagine you're cooking and this is your 30-second eggs. And you're mastering it because you got a teacher on the side, some AI that's giving
10, 9.
Yeah.
Ooh, bad.
Right? And then exactly, and then you would see him on an adventure game with a little gnome, and it's in black and white, and he's playing an adventure game while he's waiting on a date, and then the date comes in through a website. So yeah, I think one day maybe we would be doing that. It could be possible.
Yeah.
Because we are doing that. Without that augmented reality seamless experience, because we're doing that with YouTube. People cook now with a laptop. All the I do it all the time until at some point I want to master it on my own. But I come from a different generation. Would you do it that way if you could put on some glasses and it's connected to your phone, download an app, and then it's a cooking app that's gamified? Would you partake in that? It would teach you, and at the same time you're in a community, and then the community members compete for points. Or
I personally find that a little bit unnerving. I find it a little bit scary.
I am sure that some parents find it unnerving that you're so interested in flying around in a spaceship all day. You know.
True. But that could be any game. But to gamify my real life experiences is something that I'm not personally comfortable with, actually.
Well, there you go. Good for you. But I think that's always going to be part of the issue. We're going to have...
It's going to blur lines.
I guess abuse, right? And we need to make sure that's why I always take the educational aspect of things. And I think experiencing the world is the best thing, best thing of all. And technology has to help you experience it better. Like, for example, what happened now with the Event Horizon Telescope project, where basically everything to our disposal was used. Intelligence, IQ, technology, and vision, and interest. Cooperation. That, if augmented reality can do that, we got to embrace it, you know, but we got to watch out. And that's why I'm kind of happy about it, that these big tech companies take ownership over people, which is also part of the risk. So again, going back, collaboration and open source, and then that's exactly what that was. It's a form of open source, right? So let's keep looking at it and educating people about augmented reality and virtual reality. So there's a difference. Is there a augmented reality project or game that you're aware of?
I remember that Microsoft was actually working on a augmented reality lens that would be able to basically a much better, much more reliable, much more efficient version of the Google Glasses.
Right.
You would work with Microsoft Home Office. It would always keep track of your hand, and you could interact with virtual icons in real life, and you could open your Xbox or check your email.
And their glasses?
And it was a sort of like hood, helmet, something.
A helmet?
Yeah. And
oh my God.
It would, of course, clear lenses would cover your eyes.
So the helmet holds the computing power?
I don't remember, but this was a few years
Interesting.
ago.
You know what we'll do? Let's save that for the next show.
We can look into it.
Let's look into it and come back with that. So,
I think before we finish, the biggest fear of virtual reality and augmented reality is, of course, that people will deny reality and try to live. And of course,
The thing is, we're kind of there already.
yeah, we are there already, and that was the point I was going to make.
Yeah, I've met a friend of mine after many years, a mom, and her daughter had a problem with letting go of the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So she's experiencing her life through a little window, because to her that's the window to her reality.
Yeah.
And she basically walks around with her in there. So I agree. The issue of losing people to alternative realities that computers can do, and these gaming experiences, has to come a little bit from ourselves. So we have to be vigilant. Me as a parent, always on your case.
Yes.
You know, but I'm a gamer myself. I also spend time entertaining myself, and I think if we can always segment consuming information into a form of or education or entertainment, if you're aware of that, you can have a more enriched life. And as a parent, and that's my suggestion as your dad and all other parents out there, make sure that we can use education and promote the games that can help with that, but also kind of work out a balance and make sure nobody dives in too deep. We also do that with Netflix. Parents, I mean, once upon a time, television was the enemy, you know?
Yeah, hours.
And now it's embedded in our lives.
Yeah.
And so that's my little suggestion.
I think that's a great way to end the show then.
Yeah, no, but we still have, before we end the show, Jeff, we have to talk about the other shows.
Yes, we have to, I have to try to pronounce everything correctly again.
So we need a little list that we can explain it. Okay,
Well,
we're going to continue for a second. Interestingly, today we did not talk about blockchain. I think we have to take a little break from it. I stumbled upon this documentary yesterday. So to recap, go check it out. Black Holes, the edge of what we know. It's such a great title too, right? The edge, because it's the edge of what we know. It's the edge of
what we can know.
The black hole cannot be seen, right? And it's also because of its interaction on the edge, and we use the edge of our capacity to get it.
Wow.
It was on the limit of what we could do, and the people were nervous. They've been working a decade on making that picture, and we have to respect that. I did not respect it. I thought it was just another,
It was just a blurry picture of
long
this,
exposure, deep shot, but it was a little more complicated than that, and I appreciate that. Oh, and what's another thing?
Oh,
Very inspirational. A lot of them your age.
what?
Yeah, a lot of them your age.
Early
It was a
20s.
combination of experience and newcomers that probably have a lot of programming skills. That they can manage, and they own computer technology as a tool, and it was amazing to see that become fruition. And I'm gonna quote somebody I met for like 30 minutes. And I asked him, what are the best projects you've ever done? And he told me, Bruce, the best projects are finished ones. Yeah. So let's do this. Let's do something strange. Let's give a round of applause for all these people, for all these scientists that help our lives. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the menu for Jean-Luc. Jean-Luc, I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to do it. I'm going to have to do it.
Oh, a change of pace.
Change of pace. So, all right, guys, let's talk about the show. So on Monday, 6:30, we're going to have Sincerely Carolina. And after that, at 8, live Politica Ta Cruel.
At 8.
At 8. Tune in, because, we're moving towards the end. This is the last lap. It's probably going to be interesting. On Tuesday, we've got 3 shows, triple header.
Wow.
Florin Talk at 6. Ejecuta at 8.
Beautiful.
And Unfuckwithable. I love it.
Yeah.
At 9. Wednesday we'll have No Stay Pabo. I think that's new.
That's new, yeah.
That's new. That's pretty.
welcome to
No
the
Stay
family.
Pabo. Good. Pillow Talk on Wednesday at 8. Always interesting. Bang Papia Salute with Renee, I think, 6:30.
Relatively
on
new.
Thursday. And 7:30, Soppy Mix is back, and that's where the mix happens.
Yep. Yep.
Tech Impact next week. Tune in. It's going to be cool. We're going to do something cool. Let's see if we can get some more augmented reality materials in here. We've got a new screen. And Raw
Later
at 7.
tonight.
Sorry?
Later today.
Later today.
That's Raw 7.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, exactly. Raw at 7 today. RAW. Okay. So thank you so much, everybody. Jean-Luc, any last words for today? Today's show? Thanks
Stay
for
in
listening.
reality, kids. Thanks for listening.
All right, guys. We're going to end this thing, and I'm going to give the go-ahead to the producers. See you guys next week.